All right, let's dive into something many of us have probably seen, maybe even felt, whether you game or not, gamer rage. That intense outburst, the frustration, sometimes some pretty explosive reactions in competitive digital worlds. But what's truly going on when players rage? Is it just a burst of anger, or is there something, well, more intricate going on? Our mission today is to dig into the complex psychology behind gamer rage, and crucially, to uncover how something like empathy can actually transform these intense emotional reactions, maybe into something more constructive, more understanding. We've got a stack of recent research, expert analyses to guide us through this often fiery landscape. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so when we talk about gamer rage, what are we actually talking about? Beyond the viral clips, is it a clinical thing or...
That's a great question because gamer rage, well, it isn't a formal psychological disorder,
Mhm.
not in the books. It's more of a colloquial term, really. It describes a whole spectrum of emotions that just sort of run wild in competitive gaming. Think intense frustration, anger, aggression, emotions that overwhelm players. It leads to what we call dysregulated emotional responses.
Mm.
Basically, their feelings get out of sync with the situation.
Okay.
And you see it manifest in, well, all sorts of ways. Verbally, there's the yelling, the swearing, sometimes insults, even self-directed, but often, aimed at others.
Right.
Physically.
Mm.
It could be anything. Kicking the floor, punching furniture, sometimes even throwing or breaking controllers, headsets.
And the poor controller.
Exactly. Behaviorally, a really common one is rage quitting, just abruptly leaving a game mid-match.
Hmm.
And physiologically, their bodies are definitely reacting too. Heart rate shoots up, sweating, maybe a clenched jaw, tense shoulders. It's a full body experience, really.
I think I've definitely felt that little surge, when my character misses a crucial shot or I just cannot get past a certain point. It's like a tiny internal, well, tantrum feels too strong, but that frustration. You mentioned intense negative emotions.
Yeah.
In esports, I often hear the term tilt. Is that related? What exactly does tilt mean here?
That's a perfect connection to make because tilt is very often the on-ramp to full-blown rage.
Yeah.
It's this acute state of frustration that just completely hijacks a player's judgment. It's not just being annoyed, it actually promotes poor decision-making.
Okay, so it affects how you play.
Directly. And that inevitably leads to more errors. What's kind of insidious about it is this cycle. You get frustrated, your performance dips, that makes you more frustrated.
Yeah.
And then the aggressive impulses start building. Players often describe it as a loss of control. It's that feedback loop. It compromises performance, fuels rash decisions, and just reinforces the conditions for actual rage.
So it's definitely not just a simple reaction to losing then. Sounds like there's a whole lot bubbling under the surface. What's really fueling this fire, and why do some people seem to get tilted or, succumb to rage more easily than others?
You're right. It's much more complex than just, I lost, so I'm mad. There are many interacting causes.
Mm.
A huge one is performance failures and unmet expectations. Imagine pouring your heart and soul into a game, practicing, really trying, only for it all to feel completely wasted. You lose the crucial match, you keep dying repeatedly, you just can't get the hang of a new mechanic.
Yeah, that feeling of hitting a wall.
Exactly. That feeling of hitting a wall, of your effort going absolutely nowhere. That's what psychologists call goal blockage, and it's a massive trigger for frustration. That gap between the effort you put in and the disappointing outcome you get. It's pure psychological dissonance, and it's a powerful driver of distress.
Especially in competitive games, I imagine, where winning and losing are so black and white.
Precisely. Every defeat can feel loaded with significance, almost like a personal failing, which just amplifies the emotional impact. Then you layer on cognitive and emotional dysregulation. When that anger and frustration really take over, our ability to think clearly just evaporates.
Right.
We become impulsive, make terrible decisions. Some players even describe what feels like an emotional blackout.
Mm.
And it's incredibly common for players to start blaming everyone and everything else. Teammates are useless, there was lag, the game itself is unfair, instead of looking at their own performance.
The blame game.
Totally. And there's this fascinating concept called moral disengagement. It's where players effectively tell themselves, look, I'm allowed to be angry and aggressive because the game or my teammates, they were unfair to me first. They basically give themselves permission to lash out.
Wow, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I can definitely relate to the blame game when things go south online. So with all these personal factors, how much does the environment itself contribute, especially online? Does being anonymous really change things that much?
Oh, absolutely. It plays a huge role. Competitive settings are inherently stressful, that's a given, especially when you're up against other human players, not just AI. And that anonymity you mentioned, it creates something called the online disinhibition effect. When players are hidden behind a username, a pseudonym, they feel less accountable for their actions.
Mm.
And sadly, that often leads to more harassment, more aggressive communication. You say things you'd never say face to face.
Right.
Plus, think about online teams. They're often transient, right? You're thrown together for one match. You don't form those deep social bonds that normally help moderate aggressive behavior in, say, a sports team you practice with every week.
That's a good point.
And then in some gaming communities, let's be honest, toxic behavior has become, well, normalized. It creates this negative feedback loop where aggressive talk just becomes the default way to communicate. Research, for instance, has specifically shown that players in games like MOBAs, multiplayer online battle arenas, who tend to have more, shall we say, authoritarian attitudes, often report higher levels of anger and aggression themselves.
Interesting. So the community norms feed into it too.
Definitely. And beyond the game itself, we have to consider individual vulnerabilities and predispositions. These are key. Players might jump into a session already carrying a bad mood from their day,
Okay.
or maybe they're still fuming from a previous bad game.
Yeah, bringing baggage into it.
Exactly. Certain personality traits, like being generally prone to anger or simply not having strong self-regulation skills, make someone more susceptible. And we have to acknowledge, for gender and racial minorities in gaming spaces, there are often added pressures. Things like stereotype threat, that anxiety of confirming a negative stereotype about your group can make things even more stressful and contribute to frustration when things go wrong.
That adds another layer of complexity.
It does. And then there's a simple but really powerful acronym, HALT. It stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired, stressed.
HLTS.
Okay. If you're dealing with any of these basic unmet physical or emotional needs, your frustration threshold just plummets. It's much easier to snap when you're exhausted or hungry.
Makes sense. Basic self-care matters.
Hugely. And for some individuals, there might be something like alexithymia involved a difficulty in even identifying or expressing their own emotions. This can lead to feelings getting all pent up and then exploding suddenly in-game because there's no other outlet.
That immediately brings to mind that case study you mentioned earlier about Mikey, the 10-year-old boy. That really seemed to highlight how deep these roots can potentially go.
Yes, Mikey's story is a very stark reminder of the potential impact. He was diagnosed with something called electronic screen syndrome, or ESS. For him, it manifested as severe rages and oppositional behavior, often directly linked to prolonged daily gaming.
Wow.
The really key insight from his case was that after a 4-week electronic fast, basically no screens, his aggression was dramatically reduced. It just underscores how excessive screen time can overstimulate vulnerable individuals, making it much, much harder for them to manage their emotions effectively.
So it's not just the game content, but the sheer amount of exposure sometimes.
It can be, for certain individuals, and we absolutely cannot ignore game design's a critical role in all this. If the game mechanics overly emphasize winning above all else, or if they provide constant punitive feedback for every failure, they can actually foster the conditions where rage is more likely to occur.
So the game itself can be setting players up for frustration.
It can contribute significantly. It's probably no surprise that competitive genres, like first-person shooters or MOBAs, tend to provoke more reports of rage than, say, cooperative games or single-player adventures. Studies have specifically found, for example, that MOBA players report significantly higher anger levels compared to those playing single-player action-adventure games. The structure matters.
Right. And you mentioned something about the brain itself, neurobiology.
Yes, finally, there are potential neurobiological correlates.
Mm-hmm.
On a deeper level, our brains are involved. Studies are identifying specific brain networks. Think of the amygdala, which is like our fight-or-flight alarm center, and the prefrontal cortex, which is our control center, responsible for executive functions, like emotional regulation. For some individuals who are prone to these big outbursts, the communication or connectivity between these brain regions might be compromised.
So the control center isn't reigning in the alarm center effectively.
That's a good way to put it. It could lead to those uncontrolled emotional explosions. It suggests there might even be a biological predisposition for some people.
Okay, wow. That's a lot to unpack. It really makes you realize how many different elements are feeding into this one phenomenon. So if rage is this complex, stemming from our brains, our individual triggers, social dynamics, and game design, how can we possibly counter it? Is there an antidote? Or are we just, destined to yell at our screens forever?
hopefully not destined.
Uh,
Thankfully, there is a powerful antidote, and it's something we can actively cultivate. It's empathy.
Empathy. Okay. How does that work in a gaming context?
Well, in the gaming world, we think of empathy in two main ways. First, there's cognitive empathy. That's about perspective taking. It's trying to understand why another player might be struggling.
Like maybe my teammate messed up because they're new, not because they're trying to ruin the game.
Exactly. Seeing their error as maybe inexperience or having a bad day rather than malice, that's cognitive empathy. And then there's affective empathy. This is more about sharing another person's emotional state, actually feeling a bit of what they might be feeling.
Feeling their frustration too.
Maybe. Or understanding their disappointment. Both forms, cognitive and affective, are really powerful moderators of aggressive and antisocial behavior. They actively promote more positive pro-social interactions. Essentially, they help us reframe those negative emotions and reduce that powerful impulse to just blame everyone else.
And that's a crucial point you made. It's not just a fixed trait. Like you either have empathy or you don't. You're saying it can be actively cultivated, strengthened, even through game design.
Exactly. That's the hopeful part. We've seen several really promising ways to develop empathy in these contexts. Narrative engagement and roleplay are hugely effective. Think about story-driven games, or even specific empathy missions within games that intentionally put you in the shoes of diverse characters, experiencing their struggles, their perspectives. It makes a difference. There's actually a game called Crystals of Kador that was studied. It was specifically shown to strengthen brain networks related to understanding others' emotions in adolescents who played it.
Wow, that's fascinating. So games can teach empathy.
They can. Then there's cooperative gameplay, games designed around teamwork, where you have to rely on each other to achieve shared goals. Think Overcooked, or maybe Death Stranding in its own way. They inherently foster understanding and mutual support. You succeed or fail together.
Right, you're forced to communicate and coordinate.
Precisely. And we can even think about in-game cues and feedback. Imagine game mechanics that give you subtle visual or auditory clues about how your teammates might be feeling, almost like a little mood meter. And sometimes, simple perspective-taking exercises can be surprisingly effective. Players can consciously make an effort to remind themselves, hey, those opponents, my teammates, they're real people, they have their own frustrations, they're probably just as annoyed as I am right now. That kind of internal self-talk, that reframing, can significantly diffuse your own anger before it escalates.
That makes sense, just remembering the human on the other side.
Exactly. Now, it's important to understand empathy's nuance. It's context-dependent. It doesn't always magically prevent aggression in every single situation. Its impact can depend on the moral framing of your role within the game. For instance, if you strongly identify with a character portrayed as a victim, that empathy might actually make you feel more justified in taking aggressive actions against their perceived aggressor.
Ah, okay, so it's not a simple on-off switch for aggression.
Not entirely. But when applied thoughtfully, empathy profoundly interplays with emotion regulation. It gives you the tools to mentally reframe negative game outcomes. Instead of just blaming a teammate who made a mistake, you might consider their struggles, maybe external pressures they're under, or just that they're learning. This shifts you from individual blame towards a more collective understanding. And that reduces the intensity of your own rage and promotes more adaptive responses, like maybe offering constructive feedback instead of just yelling.
This brings us to the big so what then? What does all this mean for us, as players, and also for the people who design and manage these digital worlds? How do we turn this knowledge into actual actionable strategies? It sounds like everyone kind of has a part to play here.
You're absolutely right. It really requires a multi-stakeholder approach. Everyone's involved. Let's start with players themselves. There are several self-management strategies you can use. First, try to identify your personal triggers. Pay attention. What specifically sets you off? Is it lag spikes? Is it losing a certain way? Is it even interruptions from real life, like someone asking you to do chores mid-game?
Yeah, knowing what lights the fuse.
Exactly. Studies with kids actually show that just knowing their triggers helps them prepare emotionally. Second, take breaks. Seriously. Step away from the screen even just for a few minutes when you feel that tension starting to rise. Research suggests even short pauses can reset your mood and, bonus, often improve your performance when you come back.
Good advice. What else?
Third, prioritize your general well-being. Remember, HLOS. Get enough rest, eat properly. Address those basic needs before you sit down to play a potentially stressful game. Fourth, practice mindful responses. This could mean deep breathing exercises when you feel anger building. It could mean proactively using mute or chat filters to block out toxic players. And it means consciously trying to reframe losses, maybe as learning experiences, or sometimes just acknowledging that random chance plays a role.
Okay.
Fifth, learn about constructive quitting. This isn't rage quitting. It's recognizing when a game or a specific session is consistently triggering intense frustration and proactively deciding, okay, this isn't fun anymore. I'm going to stop for now. Or switching to a less frustrating activity before you blow up. And finally, something really powerful is exploring nonviolent communication, or NVC. It's a framework that teaches you how to express frustration constructively. It helps shift from a mindset of judgments and demands, you idiot, why did you do that, to one of partnership, focusing on observing what happened, stating your feelings, identifying your needs, and making clear requests.
That sounds like a really useful life skill, actually, not just for gaming.
It absolutely is. Now, what about the folks making the games? Game developers have a huge role. Strategies for them include balanced game design. This means really working to ensure challenges match player skill levels appropriately. Maybe using adaptive difficulty systems that adjust subtly to keep players engaged, challenged, but not constantly push beyond their breaking point into frustration.
So avoiding unnecessarily frustrating design choices.
Right. They should also actively promote cooperation. Incorporate game modes or shared goals where teamwork isn't just an optional side thing, but truly essential for success. And incentivize positive play. Maybe adopt more of a reward, don't punish philosophy where possible. Give players tangible rewards, bonus points, cool cosmetic items, maybe good teammate commendations for good sportsmanship and teamwork.
Reinforce the good stuff.
Exactly. And crucially, intentionally design empathy-building features. This means creating games with rich character development, compelling narratives that make you feel for the characters, and interactive choices that have emotional consequences and encourage players to reflect on their actions and their impact. They could even explore innovative tech. We mentioned biofeedback integration earlier, things like the rage control game concept designed to strengthen neural circuits for self-control. Or imagine future family games where the game rewards collective calmness. Maybe the environment becomes more beautiful, the calmer everyone stays.
That's a cool idea. Okay, what about the platform holders, the community managers?
Yes, community managers and moderators are vital. For them, it starts with having clear and consistently enforced community guidelines that explicitly discourage harassment and promote respectful interaction. Enforcement has to be consistent. They need multifaceted moderation, combining proactive tools like content screening with effective reactive reporting systems that players trust. Leveraging AI and machine learning is becoming increasingly important for real-time toxicity detection, analyzing not just keywords, but tone, intent, and context to differentiate harmless banter from actual harassment.
So smarter moderation.
Smarter, faster, fairer moderation. Also, thinking about inclusive design for social interfaces, maybe prioritizing features that encourage cooperation over ones that just foster hyper-competition. And finally, player education. Helping players understand the psychological dynamics of rage and the real benefits of empathy can make a difference.
And last but not least, parents and caregivers.
Absolutely. For parents and caregivers, it involves mindful parenting around gaming. This means paying attention to the types of games being played, setting clear and reasonable screen time limits, and, importantly, having open, non-judgmental conversations with kids about the emotional impacts of gaming, the highs and the lows. It's also vital to encourage balanced lifestyles, ensuring kids get adequate sleep, physical activity, and plenty of face-to-face social interaction helps build resilience and prevent those predisposing factors for rage, essentially, addressing those HLT's needs proactively for kids, too.
So we've really peeled back the layers today. Gamer rage. It's this complex phenomenon, isn't it? Woven from frustration, those cognitive biases we talked about, the social dynamics online, individual vulnerabilities. But what feels truly empowering, I think, is the takeaway that while these intense negative emotional responses are common, they aren't inevitable. They're not insurmountable. Empathy, when we cultivate it thoughtfully, really does offer a powerful pathway. It can transform that destructive anger into something more constructive, more pro-social.
Absolutely. And the shift in focus we're seeing, moving away from just a moral panic about violent game content towards a more constructive discussion about the culture and the design of games themselves, that's profound and, frankly, very welcome. By integrating things like emotion regulation training with empathy induction, supported by thoughtful game design and engaged community management, we genuinely can significantly reduce how often rage incidents happen and how severe they are. And this isn't just about making games nicer or less frustrating. It's really about enhancing overall player well-being and fostering stronger, healthier social connections, both online and off.
That leads to a final thought for you, our listeners, to maybe mull over. If games, through their design and the cultures around them, can sometimes be engineered, intentionally or not, to provoke rage, How much more powerfully could they potentially be designed to cultivate our deepest human connections? Not just within the game, but in our lives beyond the screen.
It's a powerful question. We really encourage you to reflect on these insights, maybe even look into resources on concepts like rage control training or the principles of nonviolent communication we mentioned. Understanding these dynamics is such a powerful tool, not just for gamers navigating those high-stress digital worlds, but really for anyone looking to improve their emotional responses and interactions in any high-stakes situation life throws at them.